kids because I have to get someplace by 7:30 or 7:45. And really, it is striking a balance. It's not easy to get out in the evening when there are so many things to take care of. But my dear parents, the mere fact that you are sitting here is a testament to your concern and your care and your Übergebenkeit and your devotion to your children's chinuch. At the top of the program, I quoted one of my favorite sayings. Vashgacha Pratis, Chav Cheshvan was just a few days ago. One of my favorite sayings, and in a way it's incorrect to say my favorite because they're all favorite, of the Rebbe Rashab. And the Rebbe Rashab says we're supposed to think about the chinuch of our children for a half hour every single day. Now think about it a second. If kind of hara, you have a family bruchas yeladim, you'll be sitting a whole day and thinking about your children. So what does the Rebbe Rashab really mean? Am I supposed to sit there on my armchair and contemplate, what am I doing for the chinuch of my children? There must be a real meaning to this. And I heard a fascinating explanation. Actually, I read it in Kfar Chabad magazine, and I clipped it. And there it explains. Note what the Rebbe Rashab compares it to. He compares thinking about the chinuch of your children to checking and thinking about your tefillin. Now, there are men here, and I'm sure if I ask you, do you sit a whole day and check your tefillin? No. You give it a professional to check. Why? Because you know they're mumcha in their field. So, too, we entrust our children to malamdim that we trust, to a chinuch system that we trust. At the same time, every day, now I'm not a man, but I remember my children, especially the year after bar mitzvah, with the mirrors checking the tefillin. Those of you who have bar mitzvah boys know, it's like a whole process. Is it here? Is it there? I guess after a few years they get used to it. But you're careful how you put on your tefillin. And if the tefillin chas v'shalom brushes across the floor, ay vey, because these are holy tefillin. In the same way, everything we do in the day, in the morning we get up and how we eat breakfast and how we take care of our home and the words we use and our body language and every single thing we do, we have to treat with the same respect. How is it affecting the chinuch of my child? As we treat our tefillin, that nothing chas v'shalom unholy should reach it. Then this saying gets a whole new perspective. No, I don't have to sit 7 hours. I would have to sit 6.5 hours, Baruch Hashem, on my couch and think about my children's chinuch. Verkehrt. 24 hours a day, whatever I do, I think, how will it affect my child's chinuch? And if that's our perspective, that's why you're here. Because we're partners. Many of you may have heard me say this before, but I repeat it every year because I repeat it every day. When I first was asked to take this job by Rabbi Chadakov, the Rebbe's secretary, some of you may, I don't know if any of you, but maybe some of you, have been in Rabbi Chadakov's room, a tiny little room, maybe as big as this bima, and from that little room, Rabbi Chadakov was able to direct and guide all over the world. All the four corners of the world as the Rebbe's secretary. And when I first took this responsibility, the Rebbe Chadakov told me, your goal is to have shalom. And I said, what does shalom mean? He said, shalom with parents, shalom with students, shalom with teachers. But I still persisted. What do you mean shalom? I'm not a peace treaty maker. And he explained, in a puzzle, when there's one piece missing, there's a lack of shleimus. You can have an 800-piece puzzle, and I know some of you do love to do puzzles, and one little tiny piece of that puzzle is missing, it's not shleimus. Shalom is connected to the word shleimus. You can only have shleimus, and you can only have completion, and you can only have hatzlacha if everybody is on the same page. If that puzzle is completed fully, completely. And how do we do that? If the student, the teacher, the school, the parent, all work together to fill in the pieces. But you can only do that if you know what the ultimate puzzle should look like, what the cover looks like. If you don't know what your goal is, you'll be grappling in the woods. You'll be looking, what do I want? Where do I go? What do I do? But if we know our ultimate goal and we know our ultimate objective, then it's not that difficult because we're all rowing the boat in the same direction. And that's why we have an evening like tonight. We should hear from you. We together should focus on our goals. Before I came here, I called my sister Chani, who's a phenomenal educator and runs a school in Great Neck, New York, in Silverstein. And I knew last night she had an open school night in her school. I said, Chani, tell me something to inspire me. Tell me something which I never heard before. Because I want to feel like something, a new approach. She said, I'll tell you a story. And when she told me this story, I realized it's the most important thing I can share with you, because this is what it's all about. She told me that in Eretz Yisrael, in the newspapers, it was reported there was a very great dilemma. There was a quarrel. There was a controversy. There was a machlekas between the bus driver on a kindergarten bus and the bus matron. The bus driver knew he had to drive the bus, and the bus monitor knew she had to take care of the kids. But who puts on the seatbelt? Does the bus monitor go over to every child and put on the seatbelt? Or is it the bus driver's concern because he is the driver and he's supposed to focus on safety? And on one of the little chedarim in Yerushalayim, they had this big quarrel. The quarrel reached such an intensity that they went to speak to the supervisor. The supervisor replied, I really don't know. It's a question. I don't know the answer. Go to the boss. They went to the boss of the company, and he didn't want to antagonize the bus drivers. He didn't want to antagonize the bus monitors. He said, I don't know. Let's go to the Rav. They went to the Rav, and the Rav sent them to the Beis Din. And ultimately, it ended up by Rabbi Lau, the previous chief rabbi of Eretz Yisrael. And Rabbi Lau said, let me answer your question. And he said, when I was in a concentration camp, on Simchas Torah, there was no Torah. So one of the older Rebbeim there, he was a Rebbe from a certain Polish Chassidus, picked up a child and danced with the child and said, this is the Torah. So let me tell you, my dear bus driver and my dear bus monitor, every child is a Torah. Opening the door of the bus is like opening the pareches of the Aron Kodesh. Putting the seatbelt on the child is like putting the bendel around the Sefer Torah. Picking up the child and putting him in the seat is like Hagbeh of the Sefer Torah. Don't you want the schus of picking up a Sefer Torah? And I thought about that. If every child is truly a Sefer Torah, then every moment we spend thinking about our child, every hour we spend doing for our child, every day that we spend dedicated to our children, every month that we focus on what's best for our children, and every year of their lives, from the moment they learn to walk, as they're toddling along and we're there to help them, we don't hold their hand. We walk behind them in case they fall to help them pick them up. So if everything we do is like doing for Sefer Torah, how great is our schus, and how grateful are we, teachers in Beis Rivka High School, the Mesed of the Rebbe, a Mesed where we try to enhance every aspect of our chinuch that we give our daughters, because your children are our daughters. Isn't everything we do as important as taking care of our Sefer Torah, of our tefillin? And therefore, it is my pleasure to ask Dr. Katzenstein to address you. Why do we want Dr. Katzenstein to address you? For a very simple reason. Because we feel, and I know you will agree with me, but being a teenager is something like being a toddler. On one hand, a toddler wants to be very independent. They will want to try to walk themselves even if they can't. They'll try to climb the stairs even if they never did it before. They'll try to reach the water of the sink, of the faucet, although it's much beyond their height. But at the same time, when something strange is around, or they feel a degree of uncertainty, where do they go running? To their mother's apron. Well, today we don't wear aprons, I don't think so, but whatever, to hold on to the mother. Because on one hand, there is the striving for independence. And on the other hand, there is the need for parental guidance and the need for parental direction. In one of the Igris, there was a letter from a mechanech, where he writes the Rebbe as follows. To the Rebbe, dear Rebbe. He didn't write dear Rebbe, by the way. I'm paraphrasing that part. I've been a chinuch for 25 years. I've taught boys all my life, between the age of 14 and 17. I loved what I was doing, but now I think I should retire. They have so much energy. They're like always a step ahead of me. It's becoming an impossible task for me. I don't know if I can keep up with them. And I don't know if I have the energy anymore. And I don't know if I'm the right person anymore. And the Rebbe answers him as follows. Not only should you not retire, you should take upon you another class as well. Because it's your wisdom combined with their energy together that's going to create the ultimate chinuch environment. It's their positive energy, and anybody who saw any pictures from the Kiddush Sunday night can see their energy, and the wisdom of the parents that together working with you, with the empowerment that you will receive and the guidance and direction, together working as a team, as Rabbi Chadikov said, with shleimus, we can accomplish our goal. Dr. Katzenstein is not only a clinical therapist, but he's on the board of Nefesh. Nefesh is one of my favorite organizations. It was founded a number of years ago. I still remember when there was a realization that psychology for Torah, according to Torah, psychology for therapists who are psychologists in the field of psychology, who are Torah observant and mitzvahs observant, are not the same as simply secular therapists. And many times the Rebbe would often say to go to a frum psychologist, a frum professional. So they banded together to form an organization called Nefesh, which is focused on integrating Torah and psychology, but that's really incorrect, because Torah has psychology in it. Hafach ba v'hafach ba kol bo. My privilege and honor to present to you Dr. Katzenstein.
Thank you. Good evening, mothers and fathers whose wives dragged them here. After an introduction like that, I'm not sure there's anything left for me to say, but we're going to try. Okay. So about a year ago, I was talking to a teenager in my office, and I asked him about his religious status. Nowadays, the fact that somebody wears a yarmulke or a sheitel doesn't necessarily mean that they're frum, unfortunately. So he told me that he does consider himself religious, but he keeps half Shabbos. Anybody familiar with this term? No? Okay. So apparently there's a phenomenon across many communities that's pretty troubling, and it's now fairly common for teenagers to keep Shabbos in all areas, except a text. So what's going on here? At first I thought that this discrepancy had to do with how are we teaching our children? Something is missing here if teenagers are thinking that they're frum and identify as frum, but they're texting or using social media on Shabbos. But then I realized there's something else entirely going on here. So imagine for a moment that I told everybody in this room that in order to keep Shabbos, you can't talk for the entire 25 hours of Shabbos. How many of us would be able to be disciplined enough to comply with that? Let's see how many of us can sit here for the next 2.5 hours of this speech without I'm just kidding, guys. Relax. See how nervous we got? But let's see how many of us can sit here for the 43.5 minutes, I think, without looking at our phones. We need to realize that for teenagers today, communication is not the same as it is for us adults, hopefully. For them, communication is often through some form of technology. It's to the point, in my experience, that there are teenagers who are afraid to make phone calls because it's too intimate. They can't dial a number, they don't even know their own number half the time, and talk to somebody and hear a voice back. It's too scary for them. There was a recent study found that the average teenager spends almost 43 hours a week on technology, which if you count it is more than the amount of time that they spend in school. It's kind of scary. I wish it was just teenagers that were spending this amount of time on technology, but unfortunately, for some of us, it becomes problematic as well. And technology is set up that way. It's set up to grab our attention and not let go. Anyone ever go down the YouTube rabbit hole? Or is that just me? You never get a clip of like Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson, and then 2 hours later you're watching World's Wildest Police Chases. You have no idea how you ended up there? So it's not just me then. Okay. So what's our response? What's our response to this? And overall, how do we respond to the way contemporary teenagers experience the world today, and how do we reach them on their level? So first, let's talk about our foundational approach. The approach to raising teenagers is very similar to airplane turbulence. If the plane starts shifting to one side, we don't run to the other side, or vice versa. We stay calm, stay in our seats, and we wait till the turbulence ends. Now, obviously, teenage turbulence lasts for about 5 years and not 5 minutes, but nonetheless, I think the approach is the same. The more we accept the fact that turbulence is occurring, the calmer we can react and with greater equanimity. While preparing this talk, I asked my daughter, Nechama, who's 12 years old, I said, I'm giving a talk to parents of teenagers, what message should I tell them? So she told me, just tell them that if their kid is angry with them or is being mean to them, it's not about them, it's just that sometimes we're going through a stage. And I think she's talking about turbulence, right? In the world of psychology, there are some people who, unfortunately, we diagnose with what's called a personality disorder. But we can't diagnose somebody with a personality disorder until they're an adult. And why is that? Because teenagers will often exhibit behaviors and emotions that can be irrational, volatile, and can appear to mirror those who have personality disorders, when in fact they're just normal, healthy adolescents. Now, one of the biggest mistakes we make as parents, myself included, is we meet our children's way of communication with our adult, more rational communication. So teenagers tend to engage in what we call emotional communication. Everybody has an iPhone. I need one. So what's our response? You need one or you want one? Everybody has one? Yeah, tell me who has one. Oh, you see, only 3 girls have one. So you don't need one, right? And since we now logically and rationally disprove their need, they're going to not anymore want one, right? Is that how it works? If it has worked for anybody, please come over to me afterwards and let me know so you can teach me some things. Emotional forms of communication need validation of the emotions. The content of the conversation is almost irrelevant. So let's review some of the traps we often fall into when we engage with our teenagers. So your teenager says, you're always on my case. You're always expecting me to let you know where I am, where I'm going, and that I have to call you when I'm out late. What do you think I'm doing? You just don't trust me. So how do we often respond? Well, you remember what happened last year when you were out with your friends. We call that blaming. Or why not just send me a quick text and stop complaining about it, right? We're focusing on the solution. Or we vacuum. Is it really that bad that your mother wants to know where you are? Or we deny or minimize. Come on, you're not that upset about it. Or it's not that big of a deal, right? But if we're validating the emotion, what we might say is, it sounds like you see yourself as a responsible person and would like some more freedom and independence. And by the way, I'm not reinventing the wheel here. Validation is important in all relationships. I was actually once having a conversation with the chief hostage negotiator of the NYPD. I can't get into that story now. It goes way beyond the scope of this particular talk. But he agreed. The single most important factor in a successful outcome for a hostage negotiator is validating the hostage taker. You can try this next time you're at a supermarket with your little kids. You go into the supermarket, you get to the checkout, all the candy is there. Your kid knows how to make sure to cause enough of a ruckus to embarrass you so that you'll give in, and says, "Ooh, I want this, could I have this?" And what do? We say, "I told you not to ask for any candy when we get into the supermarket. Shh, quiet." Right? But what if we say, "That is awesome candy. Maybe we'll get it for your birthday." What we're doing there is simply validating. You'd be surprised at how this can work. It's not 100% of the time, but it can be pretty successful. We need to focus on the emotions, not the content. I want to talk a little bit about self-esteem. We're going to transition. I work with a lot of individuals who unfortunately have been sexually abused. And the number one question I get asked by parents is, how do we prevent this from occurring? So first, I just want to let everyone know there is no foolproof way to prevent such tragic occurrences. But there are measures we can take, preventative measures we can take, to minimize our children's vulnerability and susceptibility to abuse. Children with high rates of self-esteem are less targeted. And the single biggest correlated influence on a child's self-esteem is the marital satisfaction of the child's parents. Kids feel safe and secure when parents get along and show love and respect for one another. You want to build your teenager's self-esteem? Work on your relationship with your spouse. How else do we foster self-esteem in children? We need to let them make mistakes. We have to let them fall and pick themselves up. We have to allow them to learn from natural consequences. And we're not very good at this today. With our helicopter-style parenting, we think that we're protecting them. But really, we're preventing them from maturing and learning from life's experiences. There was a study done a long time ago. There were some anthropologists who went to Papua New Guinea. Anybody know where that is? It's far away. And they went to study an indigenous tribe. These people were living this way since after the Mabel. And they noticed some interesting things about the parenting styles. So one was that all the adults were in charge of all the children. It was sort of group parenting. But the other, which was fascinating, yeah, this is good? Better? The other fascinating part of their parenting styles was they never told their children no, or be careful, or you can't do that. So if a child is playing with fire, you don't say anything, and whatever happens, happens. Now, obviously, we're not going to do that, but what they found really interesting was that later on in life, they noticed two things about these children. One, they had some pretty serious injuries, lifelong injuries, loss of limbs and other things. But two, they had an unbelievable amount of self-esteem. They were not told that they couldn't do something. Anything that they felt they couldn't do was because they learned, okay, I tried this, but I'm not able to do it. They were never told no. So moving on from our foundation, let's get even more practical. So as a therapist who works with teenagers and their parents, I'm often given the role of the decision maker. So parents outsource their decisions for their teenagers to me, and they ask all sorts of questions. What do we do if our child asks for money to buy an iPhone? What if our child wants to wear certain clothes that we don't agree with? Do we take her out of this school and send her to a different school? What do we do if a child curses at us in front of the other children? How do we handle all of these situations? How do we know if our approach is helping or hurting? So I'm going to let you in on a little secret. I'm not sure I know the answers to so many of these questions. I can make some educated guesses, but I don't know that I know the answers. And even if I had all the right answers, I'm not sure how helpful it actually is, because the questions are going to be endless and the answers are infinite. But over time, I've come to realize that it's much less important to try to find the perfect answers to these kinds of questions, but rather to rephrase the way we're asking the questions. So I think rather than asking ourselves, what do we say or what do we do, we need to ask, who do I want to be as a person, and in this context, as a parent? Now, how do we do this? How do we make it practical in a way that is actually helpful? So it comes down to something we call values. Values are not about what we do, but about who we are. How we would describe ourselves, or more importantly, how others would describe us. It's not about our actions, but what is behind those actions. And how do we know what our values are? How do we identify them? So I want to do a little exercise here. And I want us to take a minute and think about our funerals. Very pleasant exercise, I know. It's after 120, of course. So I want us to imagine that the person giving our hesped, he knows us really well. But he's not allowed to list any accomplishments or achievements that we've had over the course of our lives. So he can't say, Chaim finished Shas 7 times, or he gave $10 million to tzedakah, or he had 500 great-grandchildren. He could only describe our values. Who was Chaim? Was he caring? Was he easygoing? Was he accepting? Was he generous? Was he patient? So now let's think about our children and ask ourselves what we want them to say after 120. And remember, it's not about what you said or did, but about who you are. And now let's think, if we could identify one value above all others, what do we want to have on top of that list? What is the value that we identify with so closely when we're at our best? And the answer is going to be different for all of us. For some of us, it's going to be loving or caring or patient or generous or consistent. The amount of choices are endless, but choose one that's most important to you, and not just integrate that value, but to wear it on our sleeves, to think about that value before, during, and after our interactions with our teenagers. And this part is really important. We need to be mindful of these values during our interactions, as the impact it will have will be exponentially greater, meaning we could do or say the exact same thing in reality, but the actual impact is different depending on what's in our hearts and in our minds. And we have research to back this up. So they have studies where they take two groups of people, and they tell one group, this study is about consistency and counting. And what we want you to do is we want you to walk around your block for a month and count your steps. And they take another group, and they tell them, for this study, in order for you guys to lose weight and get more fit, we want you to walk around your block twice a day for a month. And guess what happens? The group that is told that they're doing this exercise to lose weight and get more fit, lose more weight and get more fit. The exact same actions, two vastly different outcomes. So while of course it's important to try to do and say the right things, make the right choices, what's most vital is what's at the root of the choices we make, why we make them, and what's in our hearts when we do. And essentially, that comes down to who we are, and in this context, who we are as parents. If your child asks for money to buy an iPhone, then if we say yes or no, matters less than where that yes or no is coming from. So are we saying no out of anger? Are we saying yes out of frustration? Or are we coming from a loving and caring place, and regardless of whether the answer is yes or no, our child feels the love and care we have for them? So I'm going to give you guys a personal example of how this works. I know I'm being recorded, but hopefully this won't go out on the internet. When I was a kid, between the ages of about 9 and 14, I rarely went to school. Don't ask why. A lot of anxiety, other issues. Way too long to get into in this kind of talk. You could say maybe that I was at risk. Such terms were also used back then. And I could tell you that my parents made a lot of mistakes. My parents have no clue how to get on the internet, so this is cool. They made a lot of mistakes. They sent me to the wrong professionals. They listened to the wrong advice. They used wildly inconsistent approaches in dealing with me. I actually remember the principal of my school once coming to my house and trying to drag me down the stairs. And when I resisted, he got pretty aggressive. I actually still have a scar on my arm. That's not a joke, from this principal. Turns out I wasn't the only one that had a similar experience. So now, today, as a hopefully mildly successful adult who has maybe overcome some of these challenges, what I remember most is how much my mother cared about me. And her caring nature, that value that she carried with her, was true whether or not what she did worked or didn't work, whether she said something to me that was helpful or hurtful. And despite the challenges that I gave her, there wasn't a shred of doubt for me that she cared so much about me. And after 120, may my mother live and be well, that's what I'm going to say about her. Now, I certainly didn't realize it at the time. So this is important. So much of the work we put into our children, we don't see immediate or even not so immediate results from. And we wonder, is anything happening? Are we doing anything, or is this all for naught? So I want to tell you a little bit about bamboo. Anybody know how bamboo grows? No? No botanists here? Okay. So the way, you're not supposed to say yes, because then you're stealing my thunder. So here's how you grow bamboo. You plant it, and you water it, and you tend to it. Nothing happens. And you water it more, and you tend to it more, and you make sure it gets all the sunlight. Nothing happens. And you do this again and again and again and again and again, and nothing happens. And then after about 5 or 6 years, the bamboo starts growing. And in about 6 weeks, it can grow to over 80 feet tall. Now, did it take 6 weeks or 8 weeks for the bamboo to grow? Of course not. Obviously, it's the hard work that we put in, that faith and belief in its eventual growth over those 5 years of hard work that made it happen. It's the exact opposite of the instant gratification so many of us, yes, including us adults, expect in our lives today. I'm getting out of my house to go to this speech. This guy better be worth it. He better give me some practical advice that I can immediately utilize and become a better parent. I just want to make a small public service announcement. If I did have the magic solution, I would share it. I mean, I would obviously charge a premium price because it would put me out of business. And us therapists have to stay in business. You guys know the therapist's secret, right? No? All right, I'll let you in on the secret. The secret is we help you get better enough that you keep on coming back, but not too much that you stop coming. Don't tell anybody about that, please. Now, all this sounds wonderful, but what often stops us, what impedes us from living up to our values? So I believe that through personal and professional experience, there's a lot of guilt that us parents carry. We may not call it guilt, we may not identify it as such, but I think it's guilt. Not only is it difficult to raise children and teenagers in today's crazy world, but now we're feeling guilty about the fact that we don't know how to raise teenagers in this crazy world. We've all made mistakes, and we will continue to make mistakes. But now, what is our reaction to those mistakes? What's healthy guilt, and what is unhealthy guilt, or what we'll call shame? So healthy guilt is, I've made mistakes as a parent, but overall, I have my child's best interest in mind, and I will continue to work on becoming a better parent. Unhealthy guilt or shame sounds like this. I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm a terrible parent. It's not even worth putting in the effort because I'm not getting through to my teenager. I'll just dive in and hope that my kids somehow turn out normal. By the way, and I believe this is how the Sfarim talk about tshuva, especially the Hasidic Sfarim. You guys have a lot better understanding of tshuva than us snags. And what's that approach? It's not, look at all these averos I've done, and I'm a terrible and worthless person. It's rather, I'm a child of Hashem. Someone like me could do a lot better than what I'm doing. Essentially, as the Baal HaTanya alludes to, shout out, it's about returning to our values. So how do we stay on course and engage in self-reflection, not shame, and align with the values that we identify with all the pressures that we have, social, financial, and otherwise, in a world that's been turned upside down by technology and many other factors, how do we ensure that we stay focused on that value that we carry? There's a jet in the U.S. Air Force, it's called an F-15. I think since then they already have later models. It goes over 1,800 miles an hour. It's pretty fast. It's 2.5 times the speed of sound. Now, one of the main challenges in flying this aircraft is that the pilot will often develop vertigo, or the Air Force calls it spatial disorientation. In a sense, he loses his orientation of his body in space. And sometimes, as this aircraft can go upside down, he doesn't know if he's right side up or upside down, right? So what does he do? If he thinks he's right side up and he starts going upwards, but he's actually upside down, what will happen? He'll crash to a certain death. So how does this work? The answer is that on each aircraft on the dashboard, there's a little compass-like arrow. And that arrow is always pointing towards the sky. And the pilot is trained. No matter which way he thinks he is, whether he's upside down or right side up, the arrow is always telling him the truth. And he has to follow the way the arrow is pointed. And before he ever steps foot into an aircraft, he goes through hundreds and hundreds of hours of training to follow that arrow, ensuring that no matter what, without any hesitation, he's going to stay focused on that arrow. So our arrows need to be pointed towards our values. The arrow is our GPS. And when we find ourselves disoriented and confused and helpless at times, that arrow points us in the right direction and reminds us, sometimes in a world that's turned upside down, what our values are. It reminds us that who we are is that caring mother or patient father. Those are our values. Now, there might be some here, maybe even more than a few, who are thinking to themselves, okay, I hear this, but for me, it's just too late. I have no influence over my daughter. She doesn't listen to me. Can't engage with her. She doesn't think I love her, and I don't think she ever will. So I want to end with a story. But before I do, I'm happy to stay afterwards, answer any questions, talk to you guys. So this story takes place in a small town in Spain. And there was a man, his name was Jorge, and he had a vicious argument with his son. His son's name was Paco. And the fight ended with his son cursing him out and saying, I never want to see you or speak to you again. And the next day, Jorge goes to his son's room and he sees that his bed is empty. Paco had run away. So, overcome with remorse and regret, he realized he wants to see his son more than anything else in the world. He wanted to start over. He forgave everything. He just wanted his son to come home again. So Jorge went to the center of town in a well-known location, to a store there, and he hung up a big sign, and it said, Paco, come home. I love you. Please meet me here tomorrow morning. So the next morning, Jorge goes to the store. where he finds no less than 7 young boys who were also named Paco, who also had run away from home. They were all answering that sign, all hoping it was their father who was inviting them to come home. Thank you very much.
I think if we just walk out of here, remember the arrow is always showing upward in that F-15 flight plane. It was worth coming out tonight. Just remember, it's always showing upward. And every word you said was so meaningful, a lot to think about, a lot to do, and most important of all, a lot to internalize to form the foundation, and so we can always remember where the arrow is pointed. Before we continue, as always, and every time we get together, every morning, maybe those of you who went to Bistrifka remember, as we start the day, we hear Dvar Malchus. We hear a word from the Rebbe upon the topic. So in a few minutes, I'm waiting for Malka Eisenbach to come back. She's my tech person, and she takes care of all these things. She is going to share with us, oh, here you are, Malka, Mark Katzen went to look for you, a word from the Rebbe. But before we go there, I just want to explain how the evening is going to work and the goals of the evening. As I told you earlier, it's to reorient ourselves, to give us a foundation to help us continue for the rest of the year, knowing where we're going and where we're coming from and what we're trying to accomplish. So now we'll hear from the Rebbe. Are you ready? Then if not, I'll just tell you about the next part now. Okay, by the way, we do this every single morning. Your daughter has the privilege of hearing 2 minutes or 3 minutes of something or about the Rebbe or from the Rebbe, because that's what we live with. And so we're going to hear these words, which are just going to, again, strengthen and empower us as people who give our children chinuch. And then we're going to have the privilege of dividing by grade, because we want it to be an evening where you personally can meet the people who affect your daughter's lives. You're going to meet the assistant principal for your grade. Present in the building will also be Mrs. Lane and Mrs. Sharfstein and Aliza Hirsch. Each one of them has their roles to play in our school, and they'll be here as well. And then each room, you'll be directed to which room, is going to have an assistant principal for that grade and the machanchos. Just a word about machaneches. Every teacher, in a sense, is a machaneches, because every teacher's goal is not merely to teach 5 psukim of Chumash, but to help our students internalize our everlasting, never-ending messages. But a machaneches is like the holistic approach. She sees your daughter as a whole. She's here basically till late in the afternoon. She hears what's going on. She knows what's going on. She's like the filtering process. She directs you where you want to go. This is the first person you call if you have any questions, and she'll direct you to the right people. And again, it's a privilege for us and for me to share with you the few minutes we're going to hear the Rebbe's words about chinuch.
Jetzt sagt man dort 3 Sachen, was haben gesagt, der Anshe Knesset Agdela. Unhebendig von Havei Mesudim Badim. Aber schaß mir darf mir hobakumt a Kind, auf welchem mir darf Madr sein und auf welchem mir darf Maschpier sein. Tormen sich nicht verlassen auf nächsten Blick und gleich beschließen, aber das ist ein Kind, was man darf sich mit empfiehlen in einer bestimmten Neffen. Und Tomer der rechte Blick nicht kein Guter, darf man mit gleich machlich sein und beschließen, aber man darf sich mit empfiehlen, bejahrt Kosche mit einer starken Hand und so weiter, all der sehr echt in den zweiten Zeit, aber mit dem ersten Blick und seht, das ist ein guter Kind. Soll man weiter noch nicht reintrachten und gleich beschließen, aber man soll ihm alles noch geben, wo man kann sich auf den verlassen sich, auf sein Charakter und auf sein eigenem Seichel, sagt man, dass in der höchsten Wichtigkeit und Ernstkeit, was da in der Erziehung, wie fordert das, als jeder mich beschließt, was ihm soll sich fühlen mit dem Kind und was für ein Schedule, was für ein Seder ihm soll für ihn einstellen. und der allgemeine Beziehung, sie soll sein sehr streng oder im ganzen Nordgebiet oder in der Chamisui eine von den zwischen die zwei Ksoves darf sein es Sunim Badin, man darf sich hereinlegen mit der ganzen Neshome in Abschatzen dem Neshome von dem Kind, wo der Rebischer hat dann vertruht, seine Erziehung zu der Madrich und zu der Madricha, und hat damals hat man der Haftoche, wie gesagt, früher, ja Gaitu Masosa, aber sich beschließt man, als mis müssen bedienen, mich wird nicht kein Zeit, mich wird nicht kein Attention, kein Zutragenkeit von der Neshome, die Zutragenkeit von der Herz, einfach hereintrachten sich in den Gefühlen und in dem Charakter und in der Neshome von dem Kind, Eider mi beschließt, was mit dem zu vielen sagt, hat man der Haftoche ja Gaitu Masosa, mit gefunden der richtige Weg und das es bringen zu der richtige Hatzlocho in der Erziehung von dem Kind. Was wem ist Sunim Badin hat noch ein Abteil, der Zeichen darauf ist, nicht nur darauf, was man schon beschlossen, noch eine tiefe Reintrachtung. Is see bleibt das und mit das nicht ändern, nur in der Ruf Gufe darf man sein müssen und nicht geheilt, als geht durch ein Stück Zeit, soll man noch einmal reintrachten sich, wo seine gewendete Zoe, die Resultaten von der vielen sich mit dem Kind in dem Weg, wie man sich gefühlt, der erste Zeit, was man hat, unter der Erziehung, und muss noch einmal kommen zu Beschluss, sie mir darf etwas noch mäßig sein zugeben oder ändern oder man kann umgehen, wie man beschlossen dem ersten Mal. Dabei darf man aber bewahren, wie Hamidu Talmidim Harde, an der Zielung kann sich trachten, aber wie bald das Asamen größer ist. Und wie bald damit darf sich in Ruf hereinlegen mit der ganzen Neshome, mit der ganzen Herz. Und nicht geheilter Heid hereintrachten sich, was sie soll sein, du Aufführen mit der Erziehung von dem Kind, ist heute viele, sie versteht die höchste Wichtigkeit von der Wegstellung einer jüdischen Kind auf dem jüdischen Weg. Wird sie sich begnügen mit ein Talmid, mit zwei Talmidi, mal mit drei Talmidi. Aber das ist doch verbunden mit noch mehr Reinlegen von der eigenen Neshome und von der eigenen Herzlichkeit ist eine sichere Sache, aber ich has mit will es fühlen. Dem ewigsten Saschlichus Gitter de Keches, wie gerät früher, nech Hashem ele Keche, geht Kechache ve Chayoseche, de alle neteke Keches, aber es soll maßlich sein, nicht nur mit ein Talmid, oder Talmide, oder mit zwei, oder mit drei, nur maßlich sein mit Talmidim Harde.
Thinking about decisions we make, not just haphazardly, but analyzing and thinking and evaluating and reevaluating, then Emet Hashem will have Hatzlacha. So what we're going to do now, does someone have a program page, please? We're going to divide, and I'll tell you exactly where to go, but I do want to take this opportunity to thank each and everyone who came, and working together, as we said, we'll find the shleimus we're seeking. Again, shleimus melashon shalom, because there's never a full shleimus with a sense of fulfillment, but shleimus of lashon shalom. Each one doing their part, we will Emet Hashem have hatzlacha. At the end of the session, the assistant principal in the room will tell you a little surprise for your daughter, and you can bring it home to her, actually the message home to her, and I'm sure she'll be very happy about it. So I just want to tell you what we're doing, and thank you again. Thank you, Lisa Hirsch, for a wonderful presenter. And thank you, Malka, for doing the technical aspects, and thank you to all my colleagues for taking care and running the ship so ably for the past few weeks and helping make this evening happen. So, and of course, to all the PTA representatives who made sure to spread the word in the right way. If you're ninth grade, you won't have any exercise. You're going to stay in this room, and Mara Goldschmidt and the ninth grade Machanchos will be addressing you. And as we said, we're going to try to stop on time till 9:30. If you're in 10th grade, what? Are you on the ground floor? On 11? Okay. If you're in the 10th grade, you're going to follow Mara Katzman. You're going to go up the stairs, one flight, and you'll be in the ground floor, which is now used as a seminary floor, what we call the last year's lounge and the big room. So in 10th grade, please walk upstairs, and you'll come to the ground floor. If you're in 11th grade, you're going to use that. If you're going in 10th grade, please use this exit. 11th grade, you're going to use that exit. And with Mara Brook, you're going to go down to the learning lounge in the downstairs small lunchroom. If you're in 12th grade, you'll use the same doors as the 10th grade parents, and you'll go to what we call the old library. Follow Mara Pekarsky, please. And I think you all know where you're going. Mrs. Aliza Hirsch is still here, and so is Mrs. Lane, if you have any questions. Sarah, you'll go to all the rooms, I guess. Thank you all again. Please sign in, or we can't give your daughter the little treat tomorrow morning. So please make sure you signed in. Sign in is in the back on the tables.